Hello students, welcome to TCOM 408. Dr. Mike here, and you're watching video number 10. In this video I want to talk a little bit more about journalistic ethics. Journalism, of course, should be about the fearless pursuit, the aggressive pursuit of the truth and nothing but the truth. Truth and honesty is not always part of the world of journalism, unfortunately. Now, some of the ethical concerns in journalism center around video, audio, still pictures, and how those are presented in news content. Now, there's several different groups of professional photojournalists and videographers that have put forth codes of ethics. One of these is the National Press Photographers Association, the voice of visual journalists. The NPPA has issued a code of ethics regarding still pictures and video clips in news content. Now, according to this professional organization, quoting here, editing should maintain the integrity of the photographic image's content and context. Do not manipulate images or add or alter sound in any way that can mislead viewers or misrepresent subjects. The basic ethic here in photojournalism is to not manipulate the images, but this does happen. Fox News, for example, has been caught using Photoshop to alter photos in an attempt, I guess, to make the liberals, or in this case the New York Times, look bad. But we should never, in the world of news, alter any photos. Another code of ethics regarding images was put forth by the RTDNA, the Radio Television Digital News Association, and it has a set of guidelines for the ethical use of video and audio in the news. So here's the recommendations of this professional group, the RTDNA. Do not reconstitute the truth. Don't add sounds that did not exist unless it's transparent, unless it's clear to the audience that they've been added in the edit room. Be judicious in your use of music and special sound effects. This is news content. It's not supposed to be entertainment content. And use photographic and editing special effects very sparingly and carefully, and make sure that you do not manipulate the truth. Now, if you do a case study involving any video or photography in the news, you might want to refer to those various codes of ethics. Now, here's some other ethical stuff that ought to bother you when it comes to journalism and the news. How about the tendency towards sensationalism? There's an old saying in TV news, if it bleeds, it leads. What's sensationalism? Well, that's playing up the stuff that's designed to excite and to please the more vulgar taste, whether it's sex, crime, violence, accidents. It's the journalistic use of subject matter that appeals to kind of vulgar taste. And this is part of the world of journalism. Okay? Another problem in journalism is a tendency towards stories that are kind of trivial, that don't have a significant amount of real news value. Here's a question that I feel is important. How might the juxtaposition of the trivial and the significant impact the viewer's perceptions of reality? What happens when we juxtapose or place closely together the trivial and the significant? And what happens when these appear next to each other? Suddenly, does it mean that the significant becomes more trivial and the trivial maybe becomes more significant? But what impact might that have on our values? Okay, another problem with journalism, in my mind, is the tendency towards celebrity journalism. Names, celebrities often make news. Okay, so celebrity journalism focuses not maybe on the most important stories, but it focuses on the personal lives of people, notable people, mostly in the entertainment industry. And this also is related to the concept of the paparazzi. These are the photographers who chase the celebrities around incessantly, and they're hoping sometimes just to get potentially embarrassing photographs. And paparazzi raise a lot of ethical questions about how we treat celebrities. The paparazzi. Okay, two other concerns in the world of news: obscenity and disturbing images. Obscenity, damn it, let's talk about obscenity. Okay, in the news, strong language is usually avoided or bleeped out. I remember it was quite interesting a few years ago when President Obama passed the Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare, and on camera, Joe Biden whispered, "This is a big effing deal." But you know, our current president uses very colorful language. And so the media have had an ethical decision to make about President Trump and his language, whether to censor it in news content or not. I've noticed that CNN has shifted and sometimes is quoting Trump's strong language directly. Here, Anderson Cooper is reporting last year when, I think, or 2 years ago, when Trump made references to quote people from shithole countries. CNN has shifted the ethic a little bit and is willing to quote Trump directly. All right, what about other kinds of disturbing content? Now, I warn you, some disturbing and graphic content is coming up. Here's a picture from a terrorist attack, one that we would never see in the news because it's really too gruesome. Okay, but you can make arguments for and against displaying gruesome images like this. Okay? Now, in the world of news, there's a lot of forms of content that raise ethical concerns in terms of taste and decency and acceptability, and that require some viewer discretion. So video footage or images that raise ethical issues in the world of journalism and in documentaries and nonfiction film, this is video that deals with dead bodies and gore and grief and the physically, mentally afflicted, vulgar words, gestures, sexually offensive pictures, pictures that embarrass or ridicule people. But here it's always the issue of good taste or sometimes the invasion of privacy. Now, most journalists are going to show a lot of prudence in terms of revealing this graphic content. But what if certain distasteful or shocking material is considered important to the narrative? What if it's an important part of the story and has news value? Well, different organizations and individuals have different tastes and different standards and different practices. Now, the general ethic is that decisions about taste and decency, at least in the world of news, should revolve around whether the facts are necessary for the audience to know. What does the public need to know? And you can make arguments for and against sanitizing the construction of reality in the world of news and journalism. Here's a question: is obscuring or not reporting the gory details, certain facts, details, is that a form of self-censorship that compromises objectivity and fidelity to the truth, and which ultimately does not serve the public interest? We do need to honor the viewers. We should always honor the viewers and the subjects of our news content or documentary content. So what are some of the common methods for kind of mitigating negative audience reaction to strong content? You are familiar with some of these methods. For example, you can provide an age-appropriate rating. When you rate something, you are showing some level of social responsibility. You might decide to provide an advance warning that there's explicit or disturbing material ahead. This is called the viewer advisory. Sometimes the offensive words could be obscured or bleeped out. Images can also be blurred or omitted or obscured. Descriptions could be substituted for images, instead of showing the graphic details. Disturbing content may be moved to a place or time when children are less likely to be watching that kind of content. There's a number of things you can do to tone down the content. Sometimes images are disturbing in the news, but sometimes maybe we need to see some of the realities of protest, of violence, of war. Now, a couple of other ethical issues that come up in journalism. Conflicts of interest, which journalists, of course, should avoid, and the question of the confidentiality of sources. First, conflicts of interest. This is mentioned in the Bible. No man can serve two masters. Okay, a conflict of interest, that's a situation when you have competing interests, multiple interests, and one of which could possibly corrupt the other motivation of the other interest. Now, journalists should avoid all conflicts of interest. They should not take any gifts. They shouldn't pay for any of the stories. They should avoid all conflicts of interest, especially personal conflicts of interest. What if you have a conflict of interest? Well, here's an approach, a 3-step approach for dealing with a conflict of interest, no matter what the situation. First, avoid it in the first place. Avoid personal conflicts of interest that would undermine your professional obligations. Rule number 1 is stay away from conflicts of interest. Number 2, if a conflict of interest develops, resolve it as soon as possible. Okay, try and divorce yourself from the conflict of interest. And number 3, if a conflict cannot be avoided, acknowledge it to the public or to your clients or to the stakeholders. Be honest. Now, another issue I want to talk about is the duty of confidentiality. This comes up in the news business, but other professions as well. Confidentiality, keeping your promise to keep your mouth shut. Confidentiality imposes a duty to withhold the names of sources of information or the information itself to third parties, keeping your promise to maintain confidentiality. When is disclosure of confidential information justified? Is it ever justified? What if somebody's life is at stake? Okay. Is it justified then? What if there's some kind of massive corruption? When is it justified? I can't tell you what the rules are here, but I can tell you that it doesn't happen very often. Journalists, for example, are willing to go to jail instead of being forced to disclose their sources. So the lesson here is to keep your promises. All right, that's all I've got in this video about journalistic ethics. That'll wrap it up mostly for the topic of journalism. Next, we'll move on to other ethical matters in the world of video, photography, advertising, and entertainment. So, continue to take care of yourself and stay safe. And we'll see you again next time. So long.